As the ancient mountain receives, with stony copses clasped in praise, yet new passengers yearning for conquest or salvation, who pluck at its hard-grown flowers, which have lived and felled themselves as towers. The Two Towers.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Solacene, the podcast where we reference Lord of the Rings every single week. Aaron, tell me about your poem.
Well, it was inspired by one of my favorite poems, which is called As the Cat, which I've told you about several times, which is, I think, by William Carlos Williams, and it's kind of a modernist thing, where the first line is, as the cat does something, it's like, as it creeps along the furniture or something like that, and then it never, like, finishes the simile. It never says, as the cat does this, so do I do this. Like, it never does a poetic thing like that, and nor does it talk about it, like, in terms of time, as in, as the cat does this, the dog does this. Like, so it just leaves it really open. So I like when poems have this kind of ambiguity, or maybe they don't finish their clauses. Poems have the right to do that, whereas regular sentences don't. And I thought it would be kind of a neat framing for a poem about time and how nature kind of carries us through. I use this word passengers, which I think has a bit of a negative connotation sometimes when you use it. It's like, oh, he's been a bit of a passenger today or something like that. But really, I think it can be quite a lovely word if you're talking about, say, scaling a mountain. Then it's as if the mountain is some kind of vehicle through time. I was also picturing like some kind of holy pilgrimage or hike or something like that. And just the idea of like flowers and towers which rise and fall all the time. This is why I say like Lord of the Rings kind of inspired it, because it's like the end of the era. But also there's a lot of hope springing up or shooting up through the dirt.
It's true. So today, for those of you who didn't read the title of the episode, we are talking about mentorship. This is the first in a series of loosey-goosey episodes, which we like to sprinkle in between the semesters just to keep us fresh and discuss ideas that don't warrant an entire 4-month period of time. They might just warrant 40 minutes. So mentorship is something that we talk about kind of regularly, just when we watch films or we discuss our future selves. We often see mentorship as a part of good community building and good person building.
Yeah.
Of being reverent towards a person, and not in like necessarily a religious way, the way that mentorship often was throughout history, but in a just kind of casual way of being like, yeah, they know more than me, I want to learn from them. And oftentimes people are reverse mentored by their mentee, and we'll get into that later.
Sure. Before we start, 2 things. One is the boring plug. If you're not listening on YouTube, listen there. There you can see us. And also, if you're listening on one of the podcast apps, leave a rating or review. Also on the YouTube, we have flowers this week. That's nice. I'm patching them as I speak right now.
Brought to you by flowers.
You can buy our zines. We have handmade Solacene zines, which are really, really nicely made. They make for great gifts. That's what Alicia said one time. And I think it's a good kind of marketing ploy. So buy it as a gift for somebody. And the second cool thing that I wanted to mention this week, cool/mildly embarrassing, is that on last week's episode, eager listeners will have heard me complaining about a crossword clue that Alicia and I had recently done, where the answer for the clue was vowel sound, and it was 5 letters, and the answer was schwa, S-C-H-W-A. And we were like, this doesn't even make any sense. How dumb. But then I looked it up, and actually we were the ones who weren't making any sense, and were quite dumb, because schwa is the name for like the phonetic upside down E that you'll see sometimes in dictionaries. You know, at the start, like it'll say the word, and then it'll tell you in brackets like the kind of phonetic, the syllable spelling of it, breaking it down.
Yeah.
And apparently those all have names which don't correspond to their actual sound. So like this is the most common vowel sound, and the sound is just so like doctor, farmer, the. So that's why it's the most common vowel sound. But we didn't know it was called schwa, so that was kind of a gap in our own linguistic knowledge. And we're humbling ourselves.
For sure.
Schwa.
Yeah. I just had an idea when you were talking about the flowers. It'd be like funny if every episode we were like sponsored by something innocuous, kind of like we do with the organism, but it's just like there's going to be something in the frame. Maybe we can start doing that.
Today would have
like product placement, you know what I mean?
Yeah, today would have been a great organism for it.
Yeah.
But we'll get to that.
Okay, we will get to that because the organism is back for these episodes. I started my research on mentorship. Well, a lot of it was just anecdotal from experience and from observation. But I observed that there's kind of 3 types of mentorship in life in general. So there's a corporate mentorship, which is kind of how, since Roman times, it's been a bit industrialized, like the pipeline of student to employee, and mentorship has been a big part of that. And often it'll be set up by workplaces. So you join the bank as a teller, then perhaps you have a mentor who works higher up, and then you work your way up the ladder.
This is like apprenticeship.
Yeah, it's like apprenticeship. Academic is the other type. So perhaps a first-year student being partnered with a PhD student or a graduate, alumni, and having an academic mentorship in that way. And the final type that I noticed is social. So perhaps someone who's struggling financially or struggling socially is paired with a mentor to help them perhaps figure out financial stuff, figure out a sort of therapist relationship,
yes,
but not necessarily with a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the third type that I saw in life. And I guess you could add in like familial mentorship, but I feel like that's different than what we're talking about today.
Yeah, and a lot of things blur the lines, right?
Yeah.
And I think another thing we could point out is that they don't necessarily have to be older.
Yeah, for sure.
They can be someone your same age.
Mm-hmm.
Just when you were talking about the academic mentorship, and you said a first-year student, let's say, paired with a PhD student. What do you mean paired with? Just like meeting?
Often mentorships are set up through platforms.
Oh, through the organization, like a formal thing. Because when you said that, it reminded me that I'm pretty sure the last or the most recent like formal mentorship thing that I was took part in was in elementary school book buddies.
Yeah.
And that's just seems kind of sad.
A little bit. Yeah, I did it in high school.
Book buddies is great, but I mean, it's sad that it's like 20 years ago.
That's the last time it happened, yeah. I think it could be a bit more natural if it was a part of culture.
Yeah.
Because right now it often has become a thing where you have to go through an organization. So, like, I know our university did it. You could volunteer to kind of be a tutor for younger students and show them the ropes sort of things. But not many people want, like, the younger people don't want to take part in that because, I mean, myself included, you say, what can this random PhD student teach me? Like, I don't know. Like, we're a bit low trust and kind of pessimistic people. And so I think those types of programs are a bit challenging to set up.
Yeah.
But in the soul scene, hopefully it will be a part of society in the way that it is in some parts of the world.
Yeah, I have some notes on the soul scene, kind of structural ways that mentorship could become a bit more present. I'll get into later. But I liked your breakdown of the 3 different types. Mm-hmm. I also had a breakdown of 2 different types, but I don't think they're incompatible models.
Yeah.
And mine wasn't my own. It was from a podcast I was listening to. Do you know Jay Shetty?
Yes, I do know of him.
Do you?
I don't know anything besides the name.
Well, he's kind of like he was a monk or was training to be a monk, but now he does like wellness, mindfulness, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And he was talking on his podcast about how in the Vedas, the texts, which I think you've read some.
Yeah, I've read some.
There are 2 different types of mentors mentioned. One is the Vani, and the other is the Vaku or Vapu. I didn't really hear him very well. And it was also hard to find these. I was like, oh, this is an interesting notion. I'll look into it. But the Vedas are surprisingly inaccessible. So I guess not that surprising, but I guess that's a good thing. I don't know. That it wasn't just an easy thing where I could, maybe it's something to look into further.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the Vani, these are the mentors that you never meet. These are the ones that you only know from books, let's say. In the times of the Vedas, certainly. You only know from books or like from legends passed on, but they're not a part of your life. And I thought this was really interesting because it reminds me of the parasocial relationships that people always talk about today, almost always in a strictly negative light, and almost always as in these have been invented in the last 10 or 20 years.
Yeah.
But the Vedas are ancient, and so it's really interesting to hear that they had this concept of this as a healthy part of your life, a mentor that you never meet.
Role models, basically.
Yeah, role models. And it was kind of funny in a meta way because this podcast I was listening to was an interview between Jay Shetty and Novak Djokovic, who I would probably say is one of my like Vani. Like I've never met him. He doesn't know about me, but he's kind of a role model, as you say.
Yeah.
And the other type, the Vapu, Vaku, these are the ones that you meet, you know each other, and the ones that I think structurally in the solar scene, we can do a bit of a better job of encouraging or fostering these relationships. But just regards the people who we never meet, do you have any of those? Or have never met?
Honestly, not really.
Okay.
I've never been one to have role models. And it's just like, it's not super appealing to me. But I understand it for most people because it's nice to have someone to aspire to and perhaps just to get inspiration from. Because if you just go about your daily life, you're usually surrounded by people who are very similar to you.
Yeah.
But perhaps you want to be different than the people around you, so...
Well, someone like Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I guess he is one of those guys.
That's what I was going to say. That's what I thought you were going to mention, but he's like, honestly, no. I understand you don't... That's kind of a separate category a little bit. But I was just thinking, we spoke a bit in the internet semester, and also we did a previous episode on wellness influences. But this is slightly different. But just about influences and our quote-unquote relationships to these people online that you never meet. In the solar scene, what are some ways that could be a healthier thing? My first thought is, I know you didn't use the word deliberately, but like not considering them idols, considering them more as role models or mentors, because you get that saying, never meet your heroes, right? Because they'll actually be behaved badly, or they'll shatter your expectation in one way. But I think the better thing is to not have this overly aggrandized view of your heroes. It's like they're people.
Yeah.
Even if it's a world famous athlete who seems infallible on a tennis court or whatever, it's like, that they're still a human being. So that always seemed like kind of an immature thing to think of them as like literal superheroes. And then when it comes to light that somebody does something wrong, you're like, oh, my whole worldview is shattered. So I think having a more kind of mature understanding of these people is healthier.
Yeah, I wonder, a lot of the reading I did for this was about gurus and like religious leaders across religions. And I wonder if, because historically we were taught to revere these people not as gods, but as infallible.
As links to God.
Yeah. I wonder if that trickled down into our thinking about influencers and athletes and things like that.
I definitely think almost the entire celebrity culture is from the vacuum by lack of religion. But that's a bit of a big conversation for today's thing about mentors. But I just wanted to start with this thing that mentors can be people who aren't in your life. Maybe we mentor people through the podcast.
Perhaps.
I really hope not. We're just trying to provoke thoughts.
Yeah.
Don't be like us.
Yeah. I was on ResearchGate, as one does, and I don't want to fully endorse this paper because I didn't have access to the full thing. I only read the abstract and the conclusion, but it was a Confucianist perspective on mentorship. And because I wanted to do more than just the European perspective, just because I feel like we often lean on that because it's what we were raised and kind of know. But it showed an interesting diagram of how a mentor and a mentee, the first stage is just like them bonding and exchanging information back and forth. But then their family and friends come into it because we don't like operate in a vacuum. Like if you have a mentor, your mom's going to meet them and your best friend might meet their best friend. And so there were like 3 stages of, okay, the family and friends come in and perhaps they start having a relationship with the mentor or the mentee, like back and forth. But then over time, the friends start to mingle and the families start to mingle, and it becomes this network of ideas and of growth in a way that we don't really have a model to do that anymore because so few people go to church or go to like even just like community centers. Like there isn't really a forum for this type of thing, and mentorship programs is a really excellent way of fostering community and genuine community, not just like, oh, we all go to the park on Saturdays and like sit across from each other and we never know their name. Like it's genuine transmission of ideas and mutation of ideas.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, it doesn't need to be a formal program. What I had written, like a Big Brothers, Little Sisters thing, I mean, that's a wonderful thing, but it's like in the solar scene, it wouldn't be there because, like our kids aren't so isolated.
Yeah.
What I have written down on my paper is almost the exact same thing. Dissolution of the tertiary structures, in brackets, church, bowling, plus the bowling clubs, you know, that thing with the Americans.
Yeah.
Plus mismanaging transition from youth to adult, I think is another key thing here.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm always fascinated by I know it's not just German, that it's also Swiss and Austrian, but what I know about is the German apprenticeship program. And at the age of 16, about 40% of Germans join an apprenticeship program. And I feel like that's an excellent way of fostering the transition from childhood to adulthood, because you're not being paid a full wage, but you're also not being treated as a slave the way that young workers often are in North America, from what I gather, of like, they'll be paid like 2 cents an hour instead of just like
Is that
half
a thing?
of what. It's what I gather. From everyone I know who worked as a teenager, it's like...
You did?
Yeah.
So did I.
Exactly. I was paid $2 a day to be a babysitter.
What?
Yeah.
We'll get into that off air, maybe. Exploitation of Alicia.
Yeah.
The young chimney sweep.
$2 a day for 6 a.m.
Getting paid
to 6 p.m.
a shilling per week.
Yeah. So maybe that's just personal, but I think it's good because then they have some finances to manage, and they're also being treated like students, not as employees.
Yeah.
The way that I feel like when you get a job as a young person at least in Canada, I'll just speak about that, you're treated immediately like an employee. And like there's no intention by the employer to teach you and like grow you and perhaps contribute to society.
Well, this is what I mean structurally. Like the corporate or the workplace is a really easy example, but I was also thinking about schools. But in the workplace, it's like, we were talking about this yesterday, the difference between someone working at Walmart for like 25 years versus 100 years ago if they're working at their local grocery store or convenience store for 25 years. In Walmart, like there's such a kind of codified hierarchy, and you're so kind of distanced from the other people, least of all the Waltons. I think that's the name, the family who run it. Like you don't know anybody is what I'm saying. And I have written down something that I thought was really clever, but maybe not that clever, which is that in the modern workplace, everyone kind of pretends to love the company and hate the company, meaning love the company, the organization. We have to be like, oh, we're a team member, you know, Walmart this, Walmart that, but hate the company as in we are alienated from the actual people that form that supposed team.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's not entirely pretend, like some of it is real, because you think about after a 40-hour week doing something really menial in a place that's very depressing, you're not then going to want to be friends with your coworkers or see them on the weekend.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's designed to, or maybe inadvertently, it pushes us apart.
Absolutely.
Whereas like 100 years ago, I think it would, like, why would you hate the people if you're working there? You're like shooting the breeze as you stock the shelves.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like more cash.
Yeah, there's more actual, I mean, as you said to me yesterday, they should have made you partner by now. The famous quote from Christmas with the Cranks.
Yeah.
But now it's like you could work somewhere for literally your entire career and never be made partner because there's 5,000 people in your role.
And then on the final day, you get a cake.
Yeah.
It's like...
That's so sad. I read a little bit more about the German apprenticeship program because I think it's a good model for the Solacene, and it really, along the same lines, inspired me as to how to be a community thinker, like to not be an individualist, and that the people who take on apprentices, there's like no expectation that they're going to stay with your company. It's just like, I want to teach this person a skill.
Yeah.
Then they can go on to university and do like a related skill. They can go on to a different company in the community. I don't really care.
A rival even.
Yeah.
A rival company, right?
Exactly.
Because what goes around comes around kind of thing. In a positive way.
Yeah, and I think that was wonderful because here, if there's any mentorship program, say you're a mentor for RBC, they're going to really cling on to you. And if you told them, I'm thinking of going back to school, they might just drop you.
Or I'm going to BMO.
Yeah, they would just drop you. Like, there was no, like, okay, we'll keep you on until the mentorship program is done, and hopefully you'll go and thrive in the world. Like, that's not how we treat it, because we treat mentees as assets, not as students.
Yeah. Regarding school, which again I think is so like key, because we both went through school for 16 years, and I wouldn't say I had a mentor.
I agree.
And it wasn't really through lack of trying, because like when I was young, I was a lot more social than I am now. But I think a big part of it is everything is so bureaucratic and systematized, and I just wrote scared. Like, it's so kind of lame now that you'll never have like a Harry Potter and Dumbledore friendship.
Yeah.
Or even like a Harry and McGonagall.
Mm-hmm.
Even a Harry and Snape, right? Which was no mentorship. For those who don't know, Snape was an evil professor, kind of, who was basically Harry's antagonist.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you don't get that kind of personal relationship, really, and certainly not the friendship. Like, Dumbledore was taking Harry out on like one-on-one field trips.
Yeah.
It's like, you're never going to get that.
No.
Because imagine if that happened today.
Yeah, there'd be
like old
catch a case.
old headmaster like having these one-on-one conversations with you.
Yeah, I mean, like, perhaps there's some good things that's not just like.
That's why I say like scared though. Like,
yeah,
it eliminates so much when everything has to be like, well, first you have to submit 11 forms.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
yeah, I mean, in my church growing up, there was this program. I mean, it's not just my church; it's across North America, but it's called Plan to Protect, which is a training you do and then a set of guidelines to avoid any issues, which is good for the the ill-intentioned people to have to adhere to these standards. But often when I would speak to other leaders in the church, they'd be like, I know their mom very intimately.
So much.
And it's just like, I'm going to take the kid in my car, even if it's technically breaking the rules. And I feel like the thing with the schools is that the teachers just like don't know the parents. So there's no actual trust. So if the teacher did just like take the kid out for lunch, it'd be like, what's going on?
No, but even if they did know the parents, they're just straight up going to get fired.
Yeah.
Often. Like, it's so
just like a little bit of trust and a little bit of nuance, perhaps, would be great.
Well, in the Solacene, there's no ill intentions.
There's no evil people in the Solacene.
Yeah. I guess that's not true, but just somehow working a way around the paperwork that just stifles, I think, so much texture. And speaking of texture, by the way, the organism of the week, I really wish I had the prop. But it's the potato.
The humble potato.
Humble, proud, whatever you want to call it. I love those boys. Specifically, I was thinking about red potatoes.
Okay.
Because those are my favorites.
Bougie.
The Latin name is Solanum tuberosum.
Tuberosum.
Yeah, I like tuberosum a lot. And the way they connected to the Mentor episode is I just pictured them as old, grouchy, and mentory, and also Mr. Potato Head. And also, I think it was... Did you ever have one of those?
I don't think so.
I never did either.
There's some at the library that I play with.
Also, I was thinking about Lord of the Rings, right? Sam goes on his potato rant.
He does.
So, your favorite, like, culinary type of potato? What's that?
I like a good mash with chives. That's all I can say.
So, potatoes were introduced to Europe from the Americas in the 1600s. These just random facts. They have more potassium than a banana. Yeah. First vegetable grown in space. Over 5,000 varieties worldwide. August 13th is National Potato Day. So I was thinking if we're recording an episode around then, we can celebrate it somehow.
Okay, yeah.
And my favorite fact that I learned about, maybe you already know about this, the tomtato.
I don't think I know about this.
Otherwise known as the pomato. Which is a graft that's quite common that grows tomatoes on the top, potatoes underground. Yeah.
That sounds so cursed, but also like
the
cool.
Tomtato.
Tomtato. So they're not like morphed together, it's just the plant grows both.
Yeah, the plant grows both.
That's really cool.
I know.
I like this.
You can have your French fries and your ketchup from the same vine.
Wow.
From the same plant.
I feel like also how they relate to mentors is they create those little tubers that you can then plant or whatever.
Apparently those are poisonous or something like that.
Yeah. I could see that. But anyway, they grow these little baby potatoes off of themselves. That's cool.
So, worst potato variety, 3, 2, 1.
Russet.
Yeah. This is dreadful.
But it's funny because I always thought like red potatoes were so much more expensive.
They're not.
They're just like all the same price. So it's like, what kind of freak eating russet potatoes?
That's a little bit mean, but...
I mean,
there might be some good ones, like fresh out of the ground. I'm sure they're fine.
Yeah, they probably are.
Maybe just by the time they get to grocery stores, they're
leathery.
A few other random notes on the Solacene mentorship structures and sentiments I had written down. One is about the commodification of mentorship through internet life coaches and also motivational speakers.
Ooh, yeah.
Because I think, as a general rule, this is what I kind of try to go by. If their thing, like if they are famous or known or a professional at giving advice only, then the advice is probably not worth taking. Like if that's what they do is give advice, it's like, but what's your what's your skill kind of thing? Like I can say I have this certain Vani, though, like a certain athlete or writer or artist that I really like, and I can kind of observe their life and read into it a little bit. And even sometimes when people who you really do admire, when they give advice, sometimes like they're not very good at articulating it. So sometimes it's not actually the best thing to just listen to what they say about something. It's best to just observe what they do and then try and assimilate some of those habits or mannerisms or thought processes, right?
Yeah, I've come to be very, very skeptical of anyone whose whole career is giving advice.
Exactly.
Because oftentimes their mentor was another grifter, like another person who just did that. And
pyramid scheme.
Yeah, exactly. So I think just word of caution from the Solacene is be wary of people who don't have a career outside of writing their wellness books.
But like I say, I mean, wellness is one thing. Like if let's say it's an athlete who wants to write a book about wellness, they probably know a thing or two.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, like, if you want to make movies or paintings, maybe just find the filmmakers or painters that you really admire and see what they have to say about certain things, rather than just finding like motivational video for artists or like motivational speech for artists. Because I fell into that trap when I was younger, and it's I think it catches a lot of people. But along those lines, I also think in the Solacene, because this is something that's quite topical, people who do fall for, as you call them, grifters, or who do, that's kind of a subjective term, but people who do maybe fall under the orbit and start following, literally on social media, people who we deem evil or useless or, ill-intentioned in some way or other, your Liver Kings, your Andrew Tates, like whoever it may be. I feel like in the Solacene, the first instinct won't be to shame and ostracize those people who follow them. I think the better thing to do, the more productive thing, is analyze instead what that person is offering them, and why are they not getting it elsewhere, kind of thing.
Yeah,
you know
absolutely.
what I mean? Because that's the actual way to kind of eliminate your Liver Kings. It's like, well, why are so many people following them? And then think about that and then say, well, why isn't that being offered in a healthier way somewhere else? Or why can't they find that in a healthier way somewhere else?
And looking at their messaging and saying what truth is here, because often it comes from somewhere. They don't literally just invent it one night. Like perhaps with the Liver King, he has his ancestral tenets, and obviously everyone is kind of craving something a bit more, I hate to use the word primal, but like something.
No, it's true. Of course it is.
A bit more natural to govern the way that they conduct themselves. And so that's the desire that people are having, and he just latched onto that.
It's a lot better to, this is what I was saying last week also, like we look at the modern world and its problems, it's more enjoyable and more productive and more inspiring, I would say, to think about everything as a seed for what could be really good. So it's like, if this many people are looking for something more ancestral, primal, whatever it may be, or like when there was the COVID-19 conspiracy about 5G causing it, it's like, okay, I don't agree with this, but I'm not just going to call everybody who subscribes to it an idiot. I'll say there's something in there that has obviously really connected to them. And if it were, as you would say, just a complete invention, people wouldn't kind of flock to it. Like there's always, even if there's some kind of like symbolic truth to something or symbolic appeal, there's usually something, or else it wouldn't grow, like it wouldn't catch on.
Yeah.
I was also thinking in Solacene, just from the point of view of the mentor, we need to ask things of people, or else they don't grow. I think it's when people are asked to do things that they can't currently do, or when things are required of them that they can't currently, that they aren't currently capable. That's when we naturally seek out mentors to latch onto.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's why school and Hogwarts is a great example, because it's like the thing with school is every day, week, semester, year, you are asked to grow a little bit more in math or herbology, right? And so you latch on to your Professor Sprouts, because like, this is the person who knows it all, they're going to help me. or even your Neville. He's my peer, but he's going to help me because he knows that he has a good aptitude for this.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So if life is kind of, we're content to stay wherever we are, that could be like middling, or it could be at the very top of your craft or whatever, then you won't feel any need to keep striving, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be like a productive or academic thing. It could be, as you said, social mentor.
Yeah.
It could be like, wow, this person is very selfless. I want to be like them.
Mm-hmm.
In it, whatever the thing is, it has to be something that you want to improve in, basically.
Yeah.
Because if you think you're already perfect, why would you need any mentors?
That's not a good quality. So even that is something you need to be mentored on, is your pride or your self-aggrandization of thinking that you are infallible.
Yeah. I had 4 more things. One is about reading really deeply, and sometimes you can find artistic mentors. Like sometimes if there's a painter who you really love, they can kind of mentor you through the art in a way. And this is topical for us because we're considering doing a special author project, is what we call it, which is when you read everything that a certain author wrote. It could be a poet, it could be a playwright, it could be a novelist, but you read it all. And through that process, I'm guessing you would get quite a connection to the author. Mm-hmm. You would feel like you know them in some regard. And because they're probably writing about ideas or their perspective on the world, they kind of mentor you in a way.
Yeah, for sure. And you also, when you do that project, you read a bit about their life. So you read a biography or two.
Of course.
Then perhaps you can see, this is how he coped with a divorce. So this is how he coped with war or something.
Yeah.
Through this artistic mechanism. And perhaps that's a good way for me if you're an artistic person.
Yeah.
And perhaps if you are more inclined to have a sports person as your role model, you could see, they were going through like a really hard time here, and this is how they adapted their fitness routine or how they adapted their performance.
But I don't even think on that kind of somewhat surface level, I don't even think it's just that. I don't think you have to be an aspiring writer or a writer to feel this when you're reading Dickens or Dostoevsky. It's just like you can see the way their characters deal with things.
That's really true. Yeah,
that's where you can kind of learn the lessons from. Another thing in the solo scene, I think having a lack of self-consciousness and more spontaneity is quite key. So you wouldn't be posting a picture of yourself with your mentor, like #mentor. You know what I mean? Like it would just be a thing rather than like a very deliberate thing like that.
Mm-hmm.
We've kind of been making that mistake in this episode by talking about it as like mentor with a capital M, where it's like, you attain a mentor. Whereas kind of you can see it in various people, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then my last note was just that I feel it is almost inherently a kind of serious and borderline old-fashioned concept. Or it's just like if you talk about virtue or being noble or something, it's like these are dramatic words. And I feel like mentor is quickly getting there as well. And that's why Lord of the Rings kind of inspired it, because it's like Frodo, who's his mentor? Like Gandalf, let's say.
Yeah.
They're on a quest to save the world. It's like they're on a serious undertaking together. So I think that helps. I don't think it's necessary. Like I do think you can have a mentor, as you have maybe like some people who you learn things from at the garden that you volunteer at, right?
Yeah.
It's like that's not so serious a thing. You're mostly pruning mint.
Yeah.
I don't know if there is mint. So it can be something, but I do think a way to kind of almost guarantee it or almost necessitate it is to undertake something very serious, because then you'll need somebody who knows more than you.
Absolutely.
Whereas mint, you can kind of fudge your way through it without knowing anything if you want.
Mm-hmm. The alluding to my experience at the garden is a good segue into my ideal mentor, so my Solacene mentor.
Yeah.
And I kind of, was inspired by the people I work with there or volunteer with, because it's like 50% people our age and 50% people older than us, because that's how adulthood works. Yeah. But my Solacene mentor would be someone who's an artsy painter / gardener.
Okay.
So they're older and...
Man or woman?
Woman.
What's her name?
Myriad.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know. McDonald's. Just like really specific. Okay.
Sure.
So she used to be very involved in climate action and activism.
There's like a picture of her in the 80s protest, like Save the Whales.
Exactly. Her like strapped to a tree or something.
Mm-hmm.
And she still does activism now in her old age. I really have a affection for very old people. So perhaps she's like 85, 90 or something. But she still paints and gardens. And she also writes and makes art about her time as an activist and also about her vision for a beautiful, sustainable, tactile future.
Sounds like you in that when you're 80.
It does. Okay. So that's what a mentor is. You aspire to be.
I guess that was profound.
And so she would be me when I'm 80. And yeah, just someone who can kind of tell me about how to remain optimistic, because she's still optimistic about the future despite obviously having years and years and years of negative experiences as a climate activist, as most older climate activists have experienced.
Yeah.
And she would also teach me in the ways of art and garden and writing.
I had three kind of, because when I asked you about this before the episode, I was like, okay, well, let's just end it by talking about our Solacene mentor. I had three different kind of categories.
Mm-hmm.
So it's entry, so their entry into your life, present / how you interact with them.
Mm-hmm.
And the third one is a quote.
Okay.
So do you have any ideas? Like, how do you meet her, basically?
I would meet her at the garden.
Right. What would she be doing? Like, precisely.
I feel like she would doing something really precise, as that word is. She would perhaps be killing the bugs in the garlic plants.
Okay.
Just doing something very tedious and that requires a lot of patience. And I would say, wow, that requires a lot of patience, Myriad. And she would say, do you want to be my mentee? And I'd go, no, teach me the ways of your patience. And then we'd get to talking.
Yeah.
And so that's that.
No, here's a great quote. Sorry to hijack. But if you said that requires a lot of patience, or it looks like it does. And she said, the plants are my patience. Like talking like a doctor.
Yes.
TS at the end of patience.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what Myriad says
that's
to
her
me.
Quote, yeah.
And what's the other one?
Her presence, how often you interact, or like where, or how.
Yeah. I would see me going to her home. Perhaps she has a plot of land where she does her things. She has a little studio barn where she paints.
Yeah.
When I was picturing this, I was picturing me going to her bi-weekly, perhaps, because she's a busy woman. She has a lot of things going on, so I don't want to bother her too much. But I'd go there, we'd have tea, we would garden together, paint together, and conversation would flow. It wouldn't be like super formal in the way that she would like assign me readings and have me like write reflections. It'd be very just like natural and just kind of how I feel like mentors should be, perhaps. This
is reminding me of a missed opportunity I had when I was a budding entrepreneur and I tried to start my dog walking business one summer.
Yes.
I think I was 11. And on the roads beside my house in Nova Scotia, this long road that was very kind of coastal. It was a nice walk. Mm-hmm. And there was this house facing the water who was my one client for dog walking. And I was really not very good at the dog, so it didn't last very long because I'm not a good dog walker. Certainly not when I was 11 and weighed 11 pounds.
Yeah.
And so the dog, which was, I think, just a big, I don't remember what it was. I think it was a big golden thing. It was always like, it would just pull me around.
Yeah. It was walking you.
It was walking me.
Yeah.
But anyway, there was an old man who lived there who had a house that, the more I think about it, the more formative I think it was on me, just the interior decor, because it was so nautical.
Of course.
And it was very, very, it looked like SpongeBob's study. And at one time I did gardening for him.
Nice.
He paid me $100. And I was like, what?
Wow. That's a lot of money.
I know it was. I wish I had him around these days. Yeah, it was a missed opportunity because I feel like he just sat around.
He probably would have loved to have you as his apprentice. But yeah, it's hard to know. It's hard to know these things when they're in front of you. I'm trying to be a bit more cognizant of these opportunities when they arise. Like even yesterday, someone said, oh, my neighbor is in fashion. Like maybe you guys can connect. And I feel like traditional Alicia would be like, no, that's okay. Or I would say yes and then like not do it. But I'm going to really try and make an effort to like take these opportunities because that's how you build community.
Well, I think when I was 11, certainly, and a little bit now, I was just very scared.
Yeah.
I was like very scared to be in somebody else's house and scared of old people.
Yeah.
No offense to any elders listening to this, but terrified by old people back in the day. So my Solacene mentor, I kind of clarified, this was if I met them tomorrow.
Yeah.
So that I didn't want to offend like my parents or anything like that.
Well, yeah.
Because, we already have mentors kind of in our own lives. But so I've nicknamed him Park Moses. So this is different from Myriad because this is a real person.
This is a real person.
Because one time, I don't know if I was asleep or what, but it was around the middle of the day in the park near our house on a warm summer, like post-lunch.
And God incarnated.
Yeah. And over the crest of a hill with the sun behind him like a halo was this tall man with a bushy white beard and a white robe and a staff. And I tell you, it wasn't some kind of cosplay. Like, he was just walking, I could tell by the gravitas with which he strode this veil. And I was kind of like rubbing my eyes. Like, saw him kind of walking around, and I told you about it, and you were like, yeah, sure. But
no, I mean, there's like a few people around the park who look like that.
But I'm telling you, it was no character. It was no bits. Like, that was him.
But
I could sense the earnestness.
Do you think it's the man we saw yesterday with the dog?
No.
No?
No. But anyway, so Park Moses, my only note on him is very old. The entry is as his entry when I first saw him, except this time he approaches me. So I'm sitting on my stump, writing in the park, and he comes up with staff in hand and asks what I'm writing, and I tell him, and maybe I read some because he asked me to, and he slaps the quill out of my hand. That's the entry.
Yeah.
He slaps because I'm writing with a quill because it's a solacene. So he slaps it out of my hand, and he's kind of like this tough guy mentor. So the quote that I have from him is, "I'll suffer no more poetic lies, boy." Because I feel like he calls me boy, even though like I'll be 30 or something.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. I'll be 30. But he calls me like, basically it's like an old, I don't know.
Kind of like a
some
Rocky...
old Greek figure or something like that.
I see. So it's not like a fighter.
No, he's not a fighter. Okay. He just looks like what I imagine Homer looks like.
Yes.
From that one bust that may or may not be Homer. It probably wasn't. So he's always like calling me out for any time I write in a way that is pretentious or just lacking clarity, or maybe kind of obfuscating, beating around the bush, basically. Presence/how we interact. It's kind of this magical summons where every time I go to the park and write, he isn't there always. But if I have finished something, or if I have something to show, he appears.
You just like leave it on the stump.
No, he appears like so. There's a so I can learn.
Yes, good.
Park Moses. I know it's a strange way to end the episode.
No, but anyone in Montreal can perhaps try and spot him.
Yeah, track him down.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you all for listening. We'll see you on next week's episode, the next Loosey Goosey, and I hope you have a great week.